The hare and the tortoise. Hare one day ridiculed the short feet and slow pace of the tortoise. The latter, laughing, said, "Though you be swift as the wind, I will beat you in a race." The hare, deeming her assertion to be simply impossible, assented to the proposal, and they agreed that the fox should choose the course and fix the goal. On the day appointed for the race they started together. The tortoise never for a moment stopped, but went on with a slow but steady pace straight to the end of the course. The hare, trusting to his native swiftness, cared little about the race, and lying down by the wayside, fell fast asleep. At last, waking up, and moving as fast as he could, he saw the tortoise had reached the goal, and was comfortably dozing after her fatigue. Slow and steady wins the race. The fox and the woodcutter. A fox, running before the hounds, came across a woodcutter felling an oak, and besought him to show him a safe hiding place. The woodcutter advised him to take shelter in his own hut. The fox crept in and hid himself in a corner. The huntsman came up with his hounds, in a few minutes, and inquired of the woodcutter if he had not seen the fox. He declared that he had not seen him, and yet pointed, all the time he was speaking, to the hut where the fox lay hid. The huntsman took no notice of the signs, but, believing his word, hastened forward in the chase. As soon as they were well away, the fox departed without taking any notice of the woodcutter, whereon he called to him, and reproached him, saying, "You ungrateful fellow, you owe your life to me, and yet you leave me without a word of thanks." The fox replied, "Indeed, I should have thanked you fervently, if your deeds had been as good as your words, and if your hands had not been traitors to your speech." The lion and other beasts on a hunt. The lion and a lot of other beasts made a plan to share whatever they caught when they went on a hunt. The first day they went out they took a fat stag, which was cut up into 3 parts. The lion said he would be the chief judge, and laid his paw on one of the shares, and thus spoke, "This first piece I claim as your lord and king, this part, too, I claim as the most brave and most fierce of you all, and as for the third," he cried, as he bent his big, bright eyes on the crowd of beasts, "I mean to take that, too, and let me see which of you dare stop me. Might is apt to make a right." The eagle and the arrow. A man shot a shaft at an eagle, and hit him in the heart. When in the pains of death, the eagle saw that the dart was made in part with one of his own quills. "Ah," said he, "how much more sharp are wounds which are made by arms which we have ourselves made. It is sad to find that we are the cause of our own ills." The mouse and the frog. One day a mouse met a frog, and so well did they like each other that they said they would travel together. The frog feared lest the mouse should come to harm, and so tied his own hind leg to the foreleg of the mouse. After a walk of some days like this on land, they came to a pond. The frog made a start to swim, and bade the mouse be of good heart. When they had got halfway over, the frog made a sharp plunge to the bottom, and of course took the mouse with him. The poor mouse tried so hard to get to the top of the water again, and made such a splash, and such a noise, that a kite that was flying past heard it, flew down, caught the mouse, bore him off, and took the frog with him. Self-help is best. The wolf and the goat. As a goat stood on the top of a high rock, a wolf who could not get at her where she was thus spoke to her, "Pray come down, I much fear that you will fall from that great height, and you will, too, find the grass down here much more fresh and thick." "I am much pleased by your kind thought," said the goat, "but do not mind if I do not accept it, as I think that you think more of your own meal than of mine. Keep far from those you do not trust." The bad dog. There was once a dog which was so fierce and bad that his master had to tie a big clog round his neck lest he should bite and tease men and boys in the street. The dog thought that this was a thing to be proud of, so ran through the best known streets, and grew so vain that he scorned the dogs he met, and would not be seen with them. But one of them said in his ear, "You are wrong, my friend. The badge round your neck is a mark of shame, not a cause for pride. Some win fame only for their folly." The kid and the wolf. A kid who had left the side of her dam was caught by wolf. When she saw that the wolf had got her fast, and that there was no chance of flight, the kid said, "If my life is to be short, let it at least be gay. Do ye pipe for a time, and I will dance." So the wolf set to play and the kid to dance, but the music was heard by some dogs who were near, and they ran to find out what it was for. When the wolf saw them on their way he ran off as fast as his legs could go, and then the dogs took the kid home to her dam. There is oft a slip between the cup and the lip. Illustration, the fox and the grapes. A famished fox saw some clusters of rich black grapes hanging from a trellised vine. She resorted to all her tricks to get them, but wearied herself in vain, for she could not reach high enough. At last, she turned away, beguiling herself of her disappointment by saying, "The grapes are sour, and not ripe as I thought. disappointment may be lightened by philosophy, even if the latter is wrong. Illustration. The fox and the raven. A raven, having stolen a bit of cheese, perched in a tree, and held it in her beak. A fox, seeing her, longed to possess himself of the cheese, and by wily stratagem succeeded. "How handsome is the raven!" he exclaimed, "in the beauty of her shape, and in the fairness of her complexion. Oh, if her voice were only equal to her beauty, she would deservedly be considered the queen of the birds." This he said deceitfully, but the raven, anxious to refute the reflection cast upon her voice, set up a loud caw, and dropped the cheese. The fox quickly picked it up, and thus addressed the raven: "My good raven, your voice is right enough, but your wit is wanting. Flattery is often a mask to hide evil." Illustration. The bull and the goat. A bull fled from a lion and ran into a cave where a goat lived. The goat tried to stop his entrance, and struck at him with his horns. The bull, though cross at this, did not butt at the goat on the spot, but just said, "Do not think that I fear you. Wait till the lion is out of sight, and then I will treat you as you deserve. Never profit by the woes of others." The raven and the swan. A raven who did not like his black coat had the wish to grow as white as a swan, so he left his old friends and haunts, and went to the streams and lakes, where he spent all his time washing and dressing his clothes, but all was of no use. He was just as black as ever, and as he had not had food that was good for him, he soon grew ill and died. We cannot change our skins. The thief and the dog. One night a thief came to a house that he meant to rob, but he knew that he had no chance to do this till he had made the dog who took care of it quiet. So he threw to him some sops with the hope that that would stop his bark. "Get out, will you?" cried the dog. "I did not trust you from the first, but now I know that you mean no good. Do not take a bribe to do wrong." The horse and the loaded ass. A man who had a horse and an ass had a way of putting all the load on the back of the ass, and none on the horse. One day as they went in this way by a long road, the poor tired ass tried to get the horse to help him to bear his load. But the horse was not kind, and said lots of cruel things to the ass and said he must trudge on in front. The ass did trudge on, but the weight was too much for him, so he fell down on the road, and at once died. The man then came up, took the load from the back of the ass, and laid it on that of the horse, and made him bear the body of the ass, too. So the horse was punished, and at last had to bear the whole of the load. Be kind to the weak. The ass with the salt. A man who had an ass heard that salt was to be bought for less gold at the seaside than where he was, so he went there to buy some. He put as much on his ass as he could bear, and was going home, when just as they had to cross a small bridge, the ass fell into the stream. The salt at once melted, so the ass with ease got up the bank, and, now free from his load, went on his way with a light heart. Very soon after this the man went to the seaside once more, and put still more salt on his ass. As they went their way they came once more to the bridge where the ass fell into the stream. The ass thought of his fall and what had come of it, and this time took care to roll into the water once more. The salt was again gone, and he was free from his load. The man was cross at this, and thought to cure the ass of this trick, so the third time he gave him a load of sponges. As soon as they came to the bridge the ass fell into the stream, but as the sponges drew in the water he found as he trudged home that this time his load had grown in weight. We may play a trick once too often. The cock and the jewel. As a young cock tried to find food for himself and his hens in a farmyard, he saw a gem which shone with bright rays, and which someone had let fall there. The cock did not see what use such a thing could be to him, and did not stop to think if it might be of use to anyone else, but he shook his head with a wise air, and said, "You shine like a very fine and rare thing, but for my part my taste lies in quite another line. I would rather have a grain of corn than all the gems in the world. Learn how to use all things for good." The fox had lost his tail. A fox, caught in a trap, escaped with the loss of his brush, henceforth feeling his life a burden from the shame and ridicule to which he was exposed. He schemed to bring all the other foxes into a like condition with himself, that in the common loss he might the better conceal his own deprivation. He assembled a good many foxes, and publicly advised them to cut off their tails, saying that they would not only look much better without them, but that they would get rid of the weight of the brush, which was a great inconvenience. One of them interrupting him said, "If you had not yourself lost your tail, my friend, you would not thus counsel us." Illustration: the eagle and the jackdaw. An eagle flying down from his eyrie on a lofty rock, seized upon a lamb, and carried him aloft in his talons. A jackdaw, who witnessed the capture of the lamb, was stirred with envy, and determined to emulate the strength and flight of the eagle. He flew around with a great whir of his wings, and settled upon a large ram, with the intention of carrying him off. but his claws becoming entangled in his fleece he was not able to release himself, although he fluttered with his feathers as much as he could. The shepherd, seeing what had happened, ran up and caught him. He at once clipped his wings, and taking him home at night, gave him to his children. On their saying, "Father, what kind of bird is it?" he replied, "To my search and knowledge he is a daw, but he will have it that he is an eagle. We should know our weakness and our strength." Illustration. The hen and the golden eggs. A cottager and his wife had a hen which laid every day a golden egg. They supposed that it must contain a great lump of gold in its inside, and killed it in order that they might get it. When to their surprise they found that the hen differed in no respect from their other hens, the foolish pair, thus hoping to become rich all at once, deprived themselves of the gain of which they were day by day assured. It is better to be content with small things that are certain than to seek big things that are uncertain. The dog and the ass. An ass laden with loaves of bread was going on a long journey with the dog to guard him from harm. Before the journey was ended both were famished with hunger, which the ass was able to appease by eating the grass and thistles that grew by the roadside. Seeing this, the dog's hunger became still sharper, so that he begged for a piece of bread from the ass's load. "If you are hungry," said the ass rudely, "you can eat grass just as I do. I have no bread to give you." Just then they saw, in the distance, a wolf loping toward them, and the trembling ass begged the dog to protect him. "No," said the dog, "people who live alone will have to fight alone," and he went off and left the unfortunate ass to his fate. When your friends need you, go to their assistance. You do not know when you may need them. The north wind and the sun. The north wind and the sun had a discussion as to which was the stronger, and had the more power, and finally agreed that the first to compel a traveler to remove his cloak should be the winner in the contest between them. The north wind began by blowing a strong blast, thinking to tear away the traveler's cloak, but his breath was so cold that he only succeeded in making the traveler wind his garment more and more closely around him, until he resembled a sheath. Then came the sun's turn, and he shed his beams on the poor man's head so that he loosened his cloak, and basked in their warmth, and finally, quite forgetful of the cold, he cast his cloak aside and took shelter from the heat under a tree that grew by the roadside. Gentleness is often stronger than force. The fox and the lion. A fox who had never yet seen a lion, when he fell in with him by a certain chance for the first time in the forest, was so frightened that he was near dying with fear. On his meeting with him for the second time, he was still much alarmed, but not to the same extent as at first. On seeing him the third time, he so increased in boldness that he went up to him, and commenced a familiar conversation with him. Acquaintance softens prejudices. The crow and the pitcher. A crow perishing with thirst saw a pitcher, and, hoping to find water, flew to it with great delight. When he reached it, he discovered to his grief that it contained so little water that he could not possibly get at it. He tried everything he could think of to reach the water, but all his efforts were in vain. At last he collected as many stones as he could carry, and dropped them one by one with his beak into the pitcher, until he brought the water within his reach, and thus saved his life. Necessity is the mother of invention. The ass and his shadow. A traveler hired an ass to convey him to a distant place. The day being intensely hot, and the sun shining in its strength, the traveler stopped to rest, and sought shelter from the heat under the shadow of the ass. As this afforded only protection for one, and as the traveler and the owner of the ass both claimed it, a violent dispute arose between them as to which had the right to it. The owner maintained that he had let the ass only, and not his shadow. The traveler asserted that he had, with the hire of the ass, hired his shadow also. The quarrel proceeded from words to blows, and while the men fought the ass galloped off, and quarreling about the shadow we often lose the substance. The wolf and the crane. A wolf, having a bone stuck in his throat, hired a crane for a large sum to put his head into his throat and draw out the bone. When the crane had extracted the bone, and demanded the promised payment, the wolf, grinning and grinding his teeth, exclaimed, "Why, you have surely already a sufficient recompense in having been permitted to draw out your head in safety from the mouth and jaws of a wolf. In serving the wicked, expect no reward, and be thankful if you escape injury for your pains." Illustration. The fox and the crane. A fox invited a crane to supper, and provided nothing for his entertainment but some soup made of pulse, and poured out into a broad, flat stone dish. The soup fell out of the long bill of the crane at every mouthful, and his vexation at not being able to eat afforded the fox most intense amusement. The crane, in his turn, asked the fox to sup with him, and set before her a flagon, with a long, narrow mouth, so that he could easily insert his neck, and enjoy its contents at his leisure, while the fox, unable even to taste it, met with a fitting requital, after the fashion of her own hospitality. Unfeeling jests and pranks at the expense of others beget unhappiness and discomfort at the expense of ourselves. The Cat and the Monkey. Illustration: a monkey once found some chestnuts, which he put on the hot coals of a fire to roast. He was puzzled, however, as to how he should get them again without burning himself. Seeing a nice tabby cat in a corner, he thus accosted her: "Please come and sit with me a while, for I am lonely." Puss took a seat at the monkey's side, without thinking of harm. When he jumped on her back, seizing both her paws, he made her pull the nuts from the fire, despite her cries. Study your acquaintances, and beware of those who, in the guise of friendship, would use you for their own selfish purposes.